Welcome to Freya's Fairy Tales. We believe fairy tales are both stories we enjoyed as children and something that we can achieve ourselves. Each week, we will talk to authors about their favorite fairy tales when they were kids, and their adventure to holding their very own fairy tale in their hands. At the end of each episode, we will finish off with a fairy tale or short story read as close to the original author's version as possible. I am your host, Freya Victoria. I'm an audiobook narrator that loves reading fairy tales, novels, and bringing stories to life through narration. I'm also fascinated by talking to authors and learning about their why and how for creating their stories. We have included all of the links for today's author and our show in the show notes. Be sure to check out our website and sign up for our newsletter for the latest on the podcast. Today is part 2 of 2, where we are talking to P.S. Nail about her novels. After today, you will have heard about writing as a kid, being inspired by life, publishing your first book as a birthday gift to yourself, writing incredibly fast, following other authors for tips and tricks, using social media to find beta readers, setting smaller goals to feel proud of yourself and keep going, and support your fellow indie creators. Raised by Venom. A war has been brewing between two opposing groups for over 300 years. VENOM, Vampire Eradicating National Organization of Malice, and SAVE, Supernaturals Against Venom Elitists. Sage, a human trained as a vampire hunter and born into the Venom Society, made a mistake on her first night in the field when she chose the wrong vampire to kill. She now has a mark on her back from his vengeful, blood-sucking brother. Being terrorized by a vampire is stressful enough, but when secrets about her society are revealed, she struggles with her own moral code. What is Venom actually doing with its victims? Luca, a vampire and a member of SAVE, watched his brothers die at the hands of Sage. He is strategically planning to mess up her world before getting his revenge. But what fun would that be without terrifying her first? The hunter will be the hunted, as Sage and those around her become his prey. It's easy to make enemies when you have opposing views, and when these two collide, you don't want to be in the way. Blood will spill, and hearts will break in a fight for survival. The thrill of fighting him was addicting. He was addicting. His eyes darkened as he looked at me from under his long lashes. His hand tightened on my throat and I swallowed hard from the pressure, the nervousness now getting to me. He moved in close, his nose touching mine. His fangs were only a breath away, along with his lips. Sage. My breaths were ragged as I tried hard to shift my focus, to break the intense eye contact. But I couldn't. Her beautiful brown irises were giving me life. The cock of a small crossbow made me flinch, the fear of death being the only thing that could take my attention from her. Luca. So what is the biggest piece of advice that you would give to either someone starting out or someone needing help in their authoring?
So, follow a lot of indie authors that there's someone there that will go out of their way to make sure they teach people, like Golden Angel, and there's a few
Mm-hmm.
others, and they post a lot of videos about where to start or what to do and websites that are great and helpful. And then there's also discords. There's a lot of discords going around right now of different author groups that are helping each other, and they have different sections in there that you can get help with, like your blurb and different websites. And it's a neat community because we do all help, the crap out of each other. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I've helped people and so many people have helped me, and it's just that would be my biggest thing is make sure you're paying attention to what's going on. Like listen to authors when they're telling you because they got experiences, but not everyone is always right. Remember that. Not everyone is always right. Some people do give bad information.
Well, it's like reviews for anything. If you, like, and in fact, I told you this today looking at microphones. It's like, if you look at the reviews and it has, like, and this is my general rule of thumb for doing a royalty share, if it has, over 4 stars, go look at what the bad reviews are. If
Yeah.
all the recent ones are bad, that tells you they just changed something and it's awful. If the reviews are quite clearly people like on a book that that just wasn't their cup of tea,
Yeah.
maybe it is yours. Um, but like, yeah, if if it's got like 1 star, I came across one the other day that had like it was a 2 star book and it had a bunch of reviews on it, and I'm like, yeah, that's something's wrong with that book if it's sitting low like that.
Yeah, yeah, it's understandable. But if you see a book that's, has more than 4 stars, but there's a few 1 star, if you read them, sometimes that's a shopping list. It's like, well, this was too much smut for me. And I'm just like, oh, thanks for letting me know. I just added that to my cart. Like,
Yeah.
appreciate you.
I have bought. So already talked about Sierra Simone. I saw. Um, is it Demetra, the lady with the short gray hair on Book Talk? She talks book recs all the time.
Oh,
Um,
yes, yes.
yeah. So she'll talk about. Was talking about this series, and I'm like, oh, cool. I'll buy it. Not realizing like that would be like the spiciest series I've ever read in my life. So I started with the Priest series, and then after I read that, I got the American whatever the next one is, American Princess or American whatever. And I was just like, maybe we should read a review review or something first. So I'm like reading it. We're on our way to Missouri to visit my in-laws, and I'm like reading it in the car, and I'm like, whew, this is one of those car rides. Thankfully, I was reading it in book form and not in audiobook form where my 8-year-old could hear it.
Oh, yeah.
But goodness. So other things, I mean, reviews for like editor services and stuff, I imagine some authors just have, I mean, and this is people in general, have a bad experience or just didn't mesh with the editor or cover designer or whatever. So, yeah, that's same as reviews. If a lot of people are recommending and one or two are saying steer clear, maybe ask why.
Yeah, right? Make it a little bit easier on us sometimes.
So you are part of a big Discord. Is that how you got your beta readers and stuff, or how did you get the people who read your book initially?
No, I wasn't actually in that Discord for the first, I don't know, 5 or 6 months, I think, that I was an author. I didn't get in that
Okay.
Discord till later on. I actually just made a TikTok post and put in the comments, does anyone want to be, or in the video, anyone want to be a beta reader, just comment here. And they started commenting, and I just messaged people, and I was like, I'm gonna send you the book. So pretty
Oh.
much that's all that happened. It was pretty easy for me,
So did you use
surprisingly.
BookFunnel for that, or did you use like Google Docs, or how'd you do your beta
I
reads?
do I do Google Docs now because I have a set team that I use the same people over and over. Shout out to my
Mm-hmm.
team. I love my team. My beta and ARC teams are amazing. So I use the same team over and over. So I trust them enough that I give them all a Google Doc, and we can leave comments and talk or whatever. But originally I didn't really know what I was doing, and someone had mentioned a beta reader website. So I used Beta Reader IO, which is a website, and it's a great place actually because they can't copy and paste. So they get the whole book, but they can't copy it at all. So you can't,
Mm.
end up on a site later on for free. But they can also leave comments and heart and do anything on each chapter. They can leave notes at the bottom of each chapter. It's a pretty cool thing to have, actually. But I had a couple girls that were having issues using it, so I ended up just going to Google Docs now that I have my team is a little bit smaller and more
Mm-hmm.
compact. I just had random people, then. So I've had girls with me though since day one,
Okay.
like literally since Violet Flame. So
Yeah, I think Google Docs. So like I think the way it now you can definitely copy and paste out of a Google Doc.
yeah, for
But I
sure.
know you can limit like I had mine originally set up where anyone with the link could have access to it, but I know you can also set it to where like only people who I've invited that are like,
That's how I have it.
actively logged into their Google account can view
Yep.
it.
Yep, that's how I have it. I just go invite my team when it's ready, and you can see them and they're going to town, and they're like, "What?"
I actually
I'm
one
so
of the
sorry.
authors I narrate for, I actually edit for as well. These are like novella length books, so shorter. But that's how we do it. She throws the entire thing in a Google Doc, and then I will, unlike a normal editor where you get the paper of edits at the end of things you should make, I
Mhm.
just edit it and then I comment what I changed. So if
Yeah.
I change words around, I'll say, I changed it from this, or I added this, or I removed that. So she can see the changes, but the changes are already made for her.
Oh, yeah, you
So
have
that
it in
way,
editorial mode, yeah.
yeah, that way we can get through it, get to the actual making of the audiobook much faster than if she had to then go in and find all those places and add them
Yeah,
in.
yeah, I get that, yeah.
So I know most editors don't work that way. But that's the easiest way for me during all the like narrating and other things I have going on.
Right, all the endeavors.
Yeah, I'm like all the things, so we need the thing that works the fastest but gets the job done.
Yeah. So we need a magic wand.
Yes. So have you had we talked about the free sites that we don't want to be on. Have you had any instances where your stuff got leaked? Or have your team has been pretty
Yeah, I did actually. My stuff ended up on pirate sites already. Before like pretty much the day Venom release, Raised by Venom release was October 13th, and it was pretty much already on a pirate site. And I'd sent out 110 art copies,
Mhm.
and some of those people I didn't know. Like I do my, my net team.
Mhm.
So I did end up on a pirate site, and I don't know if it was from that or if someone you know, got it some other way, but I'm assuming that's the way because that's the quickest one. And the other ones didn't go up till months after their releases. So that's, I pretty much trust my team, but the
Yeah.
arc, the arc people, I'm like, I'm gonna narrow it down to a little bit more tighter knit for that too this time around.
Now I've seen a couple people talk about they used Book Funnel and Book Funnel could tell
They
if it came
can
from
tell,
there.
yes,
They could tell.
yes. It's watermarked, and you can watermark it with different things too, and it watermarks their email address. So I need to actually go do that research so I can.
So you don't know yet how it got there.
Nope, nope, I don't know because I've been so busy with everything. I sent on the season assist, my lawyer did, and I just kind of went from there, and I just kept going. I have so much stuff going. I work full time and I write full time. I don't even know how I sleep sometimes. So
I work full time and narrate full time and attempt to write on the sides.
yeah.
I'm like, yeah, maybe we have a lot of hats. But then I'm like, prior to September of 21, I sat on my couch reading and watching Netflix a lot. So that's the only time we cut out was that time. So I'm
Yeah.
like, well, I read less books. Not that I don't pick the books I audition for, but at the point I'm hired, now it's a job. It's not, reading for
Mm.
fun anymore. I have to, keep
Yeah.
track of what characters are in what chapters and, characteristics of the characters. So I was like,
Oh
that is a,
yeah.
a job. I'm not just straight reading through at that point.
Yeah, that has to be a lot of work. I'm good on anything like that. I can barely keep up with the characters. I put them in there, so I don't know how you guys do it.
I've had a couple. In fact, I was just editing for that author, and a character's name changed 7 books into the series. Suddenly, it was a different name, and I'm like, it was close. It changed from Lisa to Liza, but like, I'm like, her name was definitely Lisa at the beginning. So I'm like, so that's all the edits for that was I changed this because you changed her name. And so and she basically most of them she just goes through and approves, and occasionally there'll be like something I'll change. She's like, "Nah, I liked it the other way." I'm like, "Okay,
Yeah.
change it back."
Yeah.
So so you had a book come out around October. When is the next one coming out?
I have not set a date yet. I've said them so close together. So I had Violet Flames and then my poetry book, and then which was January, February, and then I took a little break. Emerald Skies didn't come out to July 13th, and then Venom came out 3 months later. So I published 3 months apart, and neither one of them was written. So like I didn't start Emerald Skies till it was close to being due, which is crazy because that's 121,000 words on that one.
Did that one
And
take three
Venom,
and a half weeks or a little longer?
I think it took me about 5 weeks to write Emerald Skies.
Oh my
I
gosh.
I know, I'm psychotic. I can't.
I can't even imagine. I mean, if I could just sit and write, I could do that. But like, I can't
Yeah,
just sit and write. So
right. I go to work and I come home and I get on my laptop and then I write until I go to bed and then I do it all over again. And on the weekends, I write almost nonstop. Any day I have off, I write nonstop. I'm lucky that my husband does what he does. He does a lot of dishes and cleaning for me because I'm like, I work two jobs, buddy. Like you need to do, even though I mean he works full time too, but like he picks up the slack. And
Mhm.
my kids are older. They're 16, almost 18 and 21. So like they're self-sufficient. Like go buy a
Mhm.
burger. I don't know what to tell you. Like I'm not cooking anymore, which I
Yeah.
do like a couple times a week, but very rarely. I used to cook every day and I'm like, bro, I ain't got time for this. Get out of here.
My family is so picky with what they eat that we basically you fend I have an 8-year-old
It's
and then a husband. Um,
yeah.
but it's, fend for yourself because like, husband won't eat vegetables at all. Child is very picky with what she eats, so I'm like at the point she was, I think, 6 and, like, heating up her own chicken nuggets and stuff, and I'm like,
Yeah.
"Then I can eat whatever I wanna eat, and they will eat whatever they wanna eat, and I don't have to mess with it." So
Yeah. We used to do fend for yourself night, which was like certain nights of the week, but now it's like it's fend for yourself every single day. Like
be like, "You
you
are
either
all
fend
grown adults, get your own
yes,
food."
yes. My 21-year-old's the worst. He goes out to eat almost every day. I'm like, where were you? He's like, I just went and picked up Texas Roadhouse. And I'm like, you wouldn't got a steak on like a Wednesday night? You don't eat with your money. Like, at least he has his own job though. So
Yeah, you're like, "As long as your bills are paid."
yeah. Yes, he pays his bills and then spends the rest on food. So
Hey, that is a choice that will probably have
yeah.
to change at some point.
Oh yeah. But once he finally moves out, which, he'll be like, oh, I'm out of conditioner. And I'm like, go buy some. He's like, I can't believe we're running out. And I'm like, move out. Everything he says, I'm like, move out, move it. See how easy it is to remember to buy conditioner when you move out. Like,
Yeah. You're like, "When it runs out, how do you get more?" Well, you got 2 options. You could steal it
yeah,
or go buy it.
yeah. I'm like, oh, I love him, but I'm like, I need my freedom at this point.
My daughter's, "When I turn 18, I'm gonna move to Missouri and live with grandma and grandpa." I'm like, "Okay." I'm like, "We'll see if they're even living there in 10 more years." Like,
Yeah, right.
but yeah.
FaceTime me sometime. That's what I'd be saying.
Yeah, yeah. So she's, they make their plans as we did when we were kids too. You make these grand plans. I was going to be a forensic something when I was a kid, and that definitely did not happen. So,
Yeah, I was gonna be a veterinarian, so
well, you kind of got there.
yeah, I was a vet tech for a few years, but yeah, I definitely didn't become a veterinarian, but that's okay. I like where I'm at, so.
So you said that you kind of, downplay your novel some. Do you have a like 5-year, 10-year plan? Or are you just taking it a day at a time?
I'm flying by the seat of my pants in my pantser mode. I'm just wherever I'm at, and I'm always shooting for what's next. And I set smaller goals because I know if I hit them and I shoot past them, I'm gonna be more proud of myself and I'll keep going. I know if
Mhm.
I set goals and I'm struggling to get there, I know me and I know that I'll quit or
Mhm.
I'll get frustrated at the least. So I just set tiny goals and I meet them pretty frequently. So I just keep going.
So
And whatever happens, happens.
what do your goals look like?
Uh, for today, this month, this year,
Let's go with today. Like, do you have like a typical daily goal that you try to hit?
um, just depends on the day of the week. They're all vary, but yeah, my goal was today. I have 1,000 words to write today. I have this interview with you. I
Mhm.
had Saturday sips this morning on live with my TikTok with my author friends, April and Kate. So, and then I do have another little thing this evening that I have to do. But other than like, this is my goals for the day. So
So that's
I'll be
like your
done.
schedule, basically.
Yeah. Well, yeah, they're my goals though. If I don't hit them, I kicked myself in the foot. But yeah,
Yeah.
that was my goals. It's like if I don't back out of any of this, then I did good for the day. So
I'm like, so a couple of years ago, about a year after I'd had my daughter, I had like pretty much, I had like pre-diabetes when I had my daughter, so I couldn't like, I had to eat very like regimented meals to keep my blood sugar even. And
Mhm.
also, like, she was always sitting on my stomach, so I couldn't eat a lot at a time. So I had lost a bunch of weight while I was pregnant because I was eating these teeny tiny meals all the time. And then
Yeah.
in the first year of her life, I pretty much gained it all back eating ice cream like every single day. So I'm in about 2015. I'm like, we're gonna like lose weight and it'll be great. And I went way like all the calories and macros and working out like every day. It was way too much. So this year, I'm like, okay, we gained. I started running in like 2017 and then my knees did not like that. So I like just slowly basically gained weight from there to last year. So this year I'm like, the goals are not calorie oriented or like macro oriented. It is eat healthier and work out more than the nothing that was happening prior.
Yeah.
And then, so those are like the health related goals. And then reading, it's like at least a chapter a day in a book that I choose, probably off my shelf, possibly on my Kindle, but not one related to narrating at all. And then at least 10 minutes a day on my own book. And it's like, just try to balance. 'Cause towards the end of last year, it was a lot of like, oh, I don't feel like editing all the audio I did today. We'll just push it off and push it off and push it off till the weekend, where I spend the entire weekend just sitting on the couch editing audio all day.
Yeah.
And,
It's
you know,
exhausting.
yeah, no one likes never having any free time ever. No one likes that. So
Yeah.
like, it's like I picked this, but then if I spend, too much time on TikTok, then I'm not getting what needs to be done in the amount of time. So this week it's like get it done, and then weekends are like I got to get these episodes ready. So like I have Monday's episode I got to get ready still. I was able to listen to about half of that interview before we got on here. So I got like the other half to finish tonight, and then I got to do the fairy tales for it. So it's
Nice.
like little goals. But then I told my husband, I'm like, once the fairy tales are done and I have a first 15 to get done, because weekends are the best time to do those. I'm like, we can like play video games, or we can do. My kid is sick, so we can't go anywhere right now. We're stuck at home, but I'm like, we could play video games, or we could watch a movie, or whatever after I finish this,
Yeah.
which is not an all day thing. I'll be done listening. I have about 45 minutes of interview to listen through, and then I am done for the rest of today. Although I would like to
Nice.
finish reading. I'm to the good part of the book I'm currently prepping to narrate, and I'm like, I just got to know what happens. Like, even though I'm having to type what characters talk in what chapters, I just need to know what happens.
Yeah, right. I need to know what's going on. That's me. I can't stop.
Yeah, I feel like we're very similar personality types. And my husband will constantly point out, you did this to yourself, you know.
Yeah, right.
I'm like, well, you know what? I wasn't making any money sitting on the couch reading. So at
There
least
you go.
my royalty checks are growing. So
Yeah, that's nice.
I'm like, it is what it is. But, I was making $0 sitting on the couch, and then narrating kind of helped inspire me to get back into my writing. So I'm not going to like dog on the narrating. So
Yeah, yeah.
it is what
I
it
think
is.
my biggest goal of the year is I want to publish at least 3 novels, even though I don't want to say this out loud. On my to be written list, I have 52 book summaries
Okay.
all ready to go with already characters and developmental ideas.
Okay.
I
And
have a
have you
lot.
grounded yourself from writing more summaries? Or
Yes, actually, I was supposed to be capped at 50, but I added because my PA is not allowing me to do anymore.
so someone
Uh,
else grounded you.
yeah, Vivi, she grounded me, so I'm not allowed to add no more to that list now. So I'm capped at 52. And I know that's going to be probably the next 20 years. I mean, it's going to be
Yeah.
or more, But so my goal this year is to release at least 3 books. So that's my goal. That's what I want to hit, and I hope I overshoot that. So
So are you continuing well, poem book, I guess you could add another poem book, but are you continuing the series that you've got going, or is that one finished?
I have 2 series out right now. The
Okay.
Primordial God series, Violet Flames and Raised by Venom is book 1 and 2. Book 3 is Silver Storms is going to be coming out this year.
Okay.
And then the Argentium Vampire series has Raised by Venom is book one.
Mhm.
Book two is Scorned by Venom. That is what I'm currently writing, and hopefully will be published soon. Because I get messages in daily like, when's this book coming out? And I'm like, hurrying, guys. Like, do you want it corrupted or not? Because I can send you hot garbage, you know?
Right.
And then I'm hoping to get book three out, which the title is unnamed. I know the name, but it's unreleased. I don't want to give the
Okay.
title. So unnamed book three is hopefully coming out this year. So
My
I
book
want.
is tentatively named. It's like he makes a joke about like, what is this, some romance novel, and then spouts off some random name. So I'm like, tentatively, that's the name. But like I know because it's a fantasy, and I'm like, the name that it has currently is too romance namey and long.
Yeah,
It's a very long name. So I'm like, we're
yeah,
gonna have to figure out something else. But then I'm kind of like, I like it being like a one-liner thing he spouts off in there.
yeah.
So maybe we'll keep it, I don't know. Be like, though, fantasy books I don't typically see beyond, like, A Court of Thorns and Roses, which is a relatively long name. Most of them are, like, 1, 2, 3 word book names.
Yeah, Violet Flames and Emerald Skies are my fantasy.
Yeah.
Venom is a paranormal romance, but yeah, uh, and they all mean something. But unless you like read the books, you really don't know what Violet Flames means or Emerald Skies means. So
I
secret
don't
kind
think
of.
there's anything wrong with that.
I mean, if people ask me, I would tell them, but no one really asks. They just read the book if they want to know.
Yeah, you're like, "It's in the book," like unless you're getting into romance where, like, the book is literally, like, the person's name or something where it's,
Yeah,
like, quite
yeah.
obvious, like, "Oh, that's the main character."
Yeah, right. Well, I have another series coming out, which I totally forgot about. It's called I'm Hers, and that one's kind of, that title means everything. I'm hers. It's simple.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with simple. Really, really
Yeah.
long as it's not like a tongue twister, I think you're okay.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, I
people
don't
can,
do the
like,
long.
remember it. That's why I feel like mine is a people wouldn't remember it, and you kind of want them to be able to remember your book name so they go buy it. So
Yeah. A blank of blank and blank is like a blank slate for people to just put words in. And I'm like, stop.
yeah, right now so the tentative name right now is How the Boss Fell in Love with the Experiment. So it's just
Nice.
very, like, I like it because, like, the line he's like, "What is this, a fucking romance novel? How the boss fell in love with the experiment." And then I'm like, "I like it, kind of."
What genre? Fantasy?
It
Is that
would
what
be
you said?
like sci-fi fantasy.
That makes more sense because I immediately went to sci-fi in my head. So
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, so sci-fi, I mean, loosely fantasy because like, it's like superheroes, which are a subgenre of fantasy, but it's set in current world in the future. So
Nice.
it's like a mix of things. So I'm like, I don't know. It'll be multi-genre, as your book should be if you want people to find it when they're looking at other things.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure.
So what do you so you write your book, you have your beta readers read it. At this point, have you flip-flopped the editing and the beta reading parts?
Yeah, so I have right now as I'm writing, I have 3 alpha readers, who are in there and they read my book as I'm writing it. So let me know if I have any plot holes or how the story's going and to yell at me that they need more, like quicker, like things like that. And then it goes to my editor and then my betas and then my arc and then publish. So
Okay. Yeah, I think I just revoked access for everybody on my book so that I could like write slower and then I could bring people back in, but I need to find new alphas that critique and celebrate. So
yeah,
I need both. Hey, you did
I
this
have a
well. Hey, this part stinks. I need that more than I was getting.
Yeah, I so mine all three are different. My PA Vivi is the one who critiques like the randomest things. It's so funny though. She catches. She's like, that arm doesn't go in that direction if they're doing it that way. And I'm like, okay, thank
I
you.
narrated a book like that. I'm like, do you realize how uncomfortable that would be in that position?
Yeah. So she's good with the most randomest things. Or no, she set the knife on the table, but she picked it up from over here. And I'm like, damn you. Like, how are you?
Those are the things
So
like I catch, and then I'm like, it's not my book. It's not my book.
yeah.
Just read the words on the damn page.
Yeah. So I have her, and that's a very important job for her. And then my aunt Vicky is also my alpha reader, and she's my cheerleader. She's the one that goes in and goes, "Oh my god, this is amazing! I need more. You know, keep going, keep going." Oh, you
Yeah.
spelled this word wrong. Like that's all she. And then I have Peach, and she's my third one, and she is a beast. She is a beast. That should be her real name because she goes in and she's like, she fixes my sentences and she's like, this, use this word. This word's a little too weak. You might want to try this one. You've used this word. You've done this word 9 times in this chapter. Use a different word for Christ's sakes. And I'm like,
You're
okay.
starting every paragraph with I. Pick a different word.
I get called on that all the time. So yeah, so I love them all because they're completely all different people and they give me different stuff when I need it,
Hmm.
so it's pretty great.
So mine right now, the only critique, if I had an actual person that was actually critiquing, not just telling me I want more, it would be, why is there only dialogue? Where's all the like descriptions of
Story.
anything? Like
Yeah.
the story is moving forward, but there's very little inner dialogue so far. It is mostly just external, them talking dialogue with like no inner turmoil of anything going on. I'm like, clearly we need to do a couple rounds of edits to get that in there. But first, let's finish the book in the way that I've been writing it.
Yeah.
Which this year started with a let's start at the beginning and read back through so we remember where we've been and then get to where we need to go.
Yeah, right. Get back on that path.
Yeah, it's not fun to come back after long breaks, but it has to happen.
Yep, exactly.
So you are working on hopefully 3 books. What are your any advice for anyone having trouble or anything like that that you've got?
Um, I was talking to an author friend who was having trouble getting she was stuck.
Mhm.
And I was like, you need to go back and do a whole read through because she was just reading the last chapter and trying to get to
Mhm.
that next chapter because she writes straight through too. And I was like, go back and start from the beginning. Pull yourself back into that book. And she did that. And she's like, oh my gosh, that actually worked. And I was like,
Yeah.
that's the only thing sometimes that can, even if you're on chapter 28, sometimes you have to go all the way to the beginning and just
Mhm.
start over. Just read. You don't have to edit, just read to pull yourself back into that mode. And that's one thing that helps me and it helps her too, surprisingly. So I didn't that's what I do anytime I get stuck. I'm like, I need to go read everything again because I can't get back into this world. Because sometimes other characters will just start yabbing. And I'm
Mhm.
like, stop talking. It's not your turn.
Yeah, it's typically what I do is just the last chapter before I start again. Unless it's been too long and then I got to start over and remember like what happened so far cuz I don't remember any of this yet. So,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
um I mean, last chapter works most of the time if it's been, recently, if I was just working on it yesterday and I'm jumping back in, like even sometimes I can do just like the last couple paragraphs of the chapter. But
Yeah,
then if it's been too long or you're stuck, you got to go back
yeah.
because I see it like a movie in my head while I'm reading it, and so like I got to like be back in the movie to figure out like, all right, this is the next scene that needs to happen.
Exactly. Sometimes someone just turns that TV off and you're like, where'd my movie go? And that's my
Yeah.
problem. Yeah. But also reading other people's books helps too. It helps, it gets you like excited for like, things. And
Mhm.
I got to that point where I'm like, I'm just gonna go read a couple books to bring myself back into my imagination.
Mhm.
So I just try to read something out of my genre so I don't like accidentally steal ideas or something. You
Right,
like
right.
read something and you like it's we all read and write constantly. Like things get stuck in your brain and you're like, was that my idea or did I read that somewhere?
Yeah.
So I try to read outside of my written genre when I do that. I try to read my friends like rom-coms or, women's fiction or whatever.
Yeah, so mine will be like superhero, but it's like adult. So like me and my husband are
Nice.
both writing in the same like grown up superheroes, which there's not. There's a couple that have kind of like comic booky looking covers to them.
Hmm.
But we're both more of like it's more fantasy sci-fi, but they happen to be superheroes kind of, or you can't even technically that's copyrighted, but like you get the point. They have superpowers. Um My husband is getting so frustrated with like copyright laws and stuff with superheroes. I'm like, mine don't have like they don't have code names, so I don't have to worry about any of that. Where he's like having to rethink all of his code names because Marvel and DC own all the copyrights on them, like
Oh
or
no.
trademarks. I don't know. I told him to look at things before he started using them, and he did not. So it's like,
No.
do you want me to say I told you so, or like just move on because you know you should have done it the first time?
Right?
The downsides to legal, and I'm like, and they will sue because they have fun doing that.
Oh yeah, yeah, for sure.
All right. Well, we have books coming out. We have advice given so far. Do you have any final parting words before we wrap this up?
Um, no, not really. I mean, just support your indie authors and support your,
Mm-hmm.
your audiobook narrators that are all doing this on their own. All these small businesses is basically what we all are. We're out here
Mm-hmm.
busting our butt trying to share stuff for ourselves and others. Most of us are very good about sharing everyone's stuff. And it's like, please just, support more into this instead of, the big business because like they got marketing. We do this crap ourselves. like, you
They
know?
have enough money. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
well, thank you so much for spending time with me. I hope you feel totally better soon. And good luck with the multiple jobs. I feel your pain very much.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate you. Thanks for having me on.
Have a good day.
You too. Bye.
Bye. P.S. Snail also liked Beauty and the Beast. Beauty and the Beast is a fairy tale written by French novelist Gabrielle Suzanne Barbeau de Villeneuve and published in 1740 in La Jeune Américaine et les Contes Marins, The Young American and Marine Tales. Her lengthy version was abridged, rewritten, and published by French novelist Jean-Marie Le Prince de Beaumont in 1756 in Magazine des Advents, children's collection, to produce the version most commonly retold. Later, Andrew Lang retold the story in Blue Fairy Book, a part of the Fairy Book series in 1889. The fairy tale was influenced by ancient Greek stories, such as Cupid and Psyche from the Golden Ass, written by Lucius Appalius Madarensis in the 2nd century AD, and The Pig King, an Italian fairy tale published by Giovanni Francesco Straparola in The Fastidious Nights of Straparola around 1550. Variants of the tale are known across Europe. In France, for example, Zemire and Azur is an operatic version of the story, written by Marmontel and composed by Graytree in 1771, which had enormous success into the 19th century. Zemire and Azur is based on the second version of the tale, Amour pour amour, Love for Love, by Pierre-Claude Nivelle de la Chaussée, is a 1742 play based on de Villeneuve's version. According to researchers at universities in Durham and Lisbon, the story originated about 4,000 years ago. Today, we'll be reading Beauty and the Beast from Andrew Lang's Blue Fairy Book. Don't forget we're reading Les Morts d'Arthur, the story of King Arthur and of his noble knights of the Round Table on our Patreon. You can find the link in the show notes. Beauty and the Beast. Once upon a time, in a very far-off country, there lived a merchant who had been so fortunate in all his undertakings that he was enormously rich. As he had, however, 6 sons and 6 daughters, he found that his money was not too much to let them all have everything they fancied, as they were accustomed to do. But one day a most unexpected misfortune befell them. Their house caught fire and was speedily burnt to the ground, with all the splendid furniture, the books, pictures, gold, silver, and precious goods it contained. And this was only the beginning of their troubles. Their father, who had until this moment prospered in all ways, suddenly lost every ship he had upon the sea, either by dint of pirates, shipwreck, or fire. Then he heard that his clerks in distant countries, whom he trusted entirely, had proved unfaithful, and at last, from great wealth, he fell into the direst poverty. All that he had left was a little house in a desolate place, at least 100 leagues from the town in which he had lived. Into this he was forced to retreat with his children, who were in despair at the idea of leading such a different life. Indeed, the daughters at first hoped that their friends, who had been so numerous while they were rich, would insist on their staying in their houses now they no longer possessed one. But they soon found that they were left alone, and that their former friends even attributed their misfortunes to their own extravagance, and showed no intention of offering them any help. So nothing was left for them but to take their departure to the cottage, which stood in the midst of a dark forest, and seemed to be the most dismal place upon the face of the earth. As they were too poor to have any servants, the girls had to work hard, like peasants, and the sons, for their part, cultivated the fields to earn their living. Roughly clothed and living in the simplest way, the girls regretted unceasingly the luxuries and amusements of their former life. Only the youngest tried to be brave and cheerful. She had been as sad as anyone when misfortune overtook her father. But soon, recovering her natural gaiety, she set to work to make the best of things, to amuse her father and brothers as well as she could, and to try to persuade her sisters to join her in dancing and singing. But they would do nothing of the sort, and because she was not as doleful as themselves, they declared that this miserable life was all she was fit for. But she was really far prettier and cleverer than they were. Indeed, she was so lovely that she was always called Beauty. After 2 years, when they were all beginning to get used to their new life, something happened to disturb their tranquility. Their father received the news that one of his ships, which he had believed to be lost, had come safely into port with a rich cargo. All the sons and daughters at once thought that their poverty was at an end, and wanted to set out directly for the town. But their father, who was more prudent, begged them to wait a little, and though it was harvest time and he could ill be spared, determined to go himself first, to make inquiries. Only the youngest daughter had any doubt but that they would soon again be as rich as they were before, or at least rich enough to live comfortably in some town where they would find amusement and gay companions once more. So they all loaded their father with commissions for jewels and dresses, which it would have taken a fortune to buy. Only Beauty, feeling sure that it was of no use, did not ask for anything. Her father, noticing her silence, said, "And what shall I bring for you, Beauty?" "The only thing I wish for is to see you come home safely," she answered. But this only vexed her sisters, who fancied she was blaming them for having asked for such costly things. Her father, however, was pleased. But as he thought that at her age she certainly ought to like pretty presents, he told her to choose something. "Well, dear father," she said, "as you insist upon it, I beg that you will bring me a rose. I've not seen one since we came here, and I love them so much." So the merchant set out and reached the town as quickly as possible, but only to find that his former companions, believing him to be dead, had divided between them the goods which the ship had brought. And after 6 months of trouble and expense, he found himself as poor as when he started, having been able to recover only just enough to pay the cost of his journey. To make matters worse, he was obliged to leave the town in the most terrible weather, so that by the time he was within a few leagues of his home, he was almost exhausted with cold and fatigue. Though he knew it would take some hours to get through the forest, he was so anxious to be at his journey's end that he resolved to go on. But night overtook him, and the deep snow and bitter frost made it impossible for his horse to carry him any further. Not a house was to be seen. The only shelter he could get was the hollow trunk of a great tree, and there he crouched all the night, which seemed to him the longest he had ever known. In spite of his weariness, the howling of the wolves kept him awake, and even when at last the day broke, he was not much better off, for the falling snow had covered up every path, and he did not know which way to turn. At length he made out some sort of track, and though at the beginning it was so rough and slippery that he fell down more than once, it presently became easier, and led him into an avenue of trees which ended in a splendid castle. It seemed to the merchant very strange that no snow had fallen in the avenue, which was entirely composed of orange trees, covered with flowers and fruit. When he reached the first court of the castle, he saw before him a flight of agate steps, and went up them and passed through several splendidly furnished rooms. The pleasant warmth of the air revived him, and he felt very hungry. But there seemed to be nobody in all this vast and splendid palace whom he could ask to give him something to eat. Deep silence reigned everywhere, and at last, tired of roaming through empty rooms and galleries, he stopped in a room smaller than the rest, where a clear fire was burning, and a couch was drawn up closely to it. Thinking that this must be prepared for someone who was expected, he sat down to wait till he should come, and very soon fell into a sweet sleep. When his extreme hunger wakened him after several hours, he was still alone. But a little table, upon which was a good dinner, had been drawn up close to him, and as he had eaten nothing for 24 hours, he lost no time in beginning his meal, hoping that he might soon have an opportunity of thanking his considerate entertainer, whoever it might be. But no one appeared, and even after another long sleep, from which he awoke completely refreshed, there was no sign of anybody. Though a fresh meal of dainty cakes and fruit was prepared upon the little table at his elbow. Being naturally timid, the silence began to terrify him, and he resolved to search once more through all the rooms. But it was of no use. Not even a servant was to be seen. There was no sign of life in the palace. He began to wonder what he should do, and to amuse himself by pretending that all the treasures he saw were his own, and considering how he would divide them among his children. Then he went down into the garden, and though it was winter everywhere else, here the sun shone, and the birds sang, and the flowers bloomed, and the air was soft and sweet. The merchant, in ecstasies with all he saw and heard, said to himself, "All this must be meant for me. I will go this minute and bring my children to share all these delights." In spite of being so cold and weary when he reached the castle, he had taken his horse to the stable and fed it. Now he thought he would saddle it for his homeward journey, and he turned down the path which led to the stable. This path had a hedge of roses on each side of it, and the merchant thought he had never seen or smelt such exquisite flowers. They reminded him of his promise to Beauty. And he stopped and had just gathered one to take to her, when he was startled by a strange noise behind him. Turning round, he saw a frightful beast, which seemed to be very angry and said in a terrible voice, "Who told you that you might gather my roses? Was it not enough that I allowed you to be in my palace and was kind to you? This is the way you show your gratitude? By stealing my flowers. But your insolence shall not go unpunished." The merchant, terrified by these furious words, dropped the fatal rose, and throwing himself on his knees, cried, "Pardon me, noble sir. I am truly grateful to you for your hospitality, which was so magnificent that I could not imagine that you would be offended by my taking such a little thing as a rose." But the beast's anger was not lessened by this speech. "You are very ready with excuses and flattery," he cried, "but that will not save you from the death you deserve." Alas, thought the merchant, if my daughter could only know what danger her roses brought me into. And in despair he began to tell the beast all his misfortunes, and the reason of his journey, not forgetting to mention Beauty's request. "A king's ransom would hardly have procured all that my other daughters asked," he said, "but I thought that I might at least take Beauty her rose. I beg you to forgive me, for you see I meant no harm." The beast considered for a moment, and then he said in a less furious tone, "I will forgive you on one condition. That is, that you will give me one of your daughters." "Ah!" cried the merchant. "If I were cruel enough to buy my own life at the expense of one of my children's, what excuse could I invent to bring her here?" "No excuse would be necessary," answered the beast. "If she comes at all, she must come willingly. On no other condition will I have her. See if any one of them is courageous enough, and loves you well enough to come and save your life. You seem to be an honest man, so I will trust you to go home. I give you a month to see if either of your daughters will come back with you and stay here, to let you go free. If neither of them is willing, you must come alone after bidding them goodbye forever. Then you will belong to me. And do not imagine that you can hide from me, for if you fail to keep your word, I will come and fetch you," added the beast grimly. The merchant accepted this proposal, though he did not really think any of his daughters could be persuaded to come. He promised to return at the time appointed, and then, anxious to escape from the presence of the beast, he asked permission to set off at once. But the beast answered that he could not go until the next day. "Then you will find a horse ready for you," he said. "Now go and eat your supper and await my orders." The poor merchant, more dead than alive, went back to his room, where the most delicious supper was already served on the little table which was drawn up before a blazing fire. But he was too terrified to eat, and only tasted a few of the dishes, for fear the beast should be angry if he did not obey his orders. When he had finished, he heard a great noise in the next room, which he knew meant that the beast was coming. As he could do nothing to escape his visit, the only thing that remained was to seem as little afraid as possible. So when the beast appeared and asked roughly if he had supped well, the merchant answered humbly that he had, thanks to his host's kindness. Then the beast warned him to remember their agreement and to prepare his daughter exactly for what she had to expect. "Do not get up tomorrow," he added, "until you see the sun and hear a golden bell ring. Then you will find your breakfast waiting for you here, and the horse you are to ride will be ready in the courtyard. He will also bring you back again when you come with your daughter a month hence. Farewell. Take a rose to Beauty and remember your promise." The merchant was only too glad when the beast went away, and though he could not sleep for sadness, he laid down until the sun rose. Then, after a hasty breakfast, he went to gather Beauty's rose and mounted his horse, which carried him off so swiftly that in an instant he had lost sight of the palace, and he was still wrapped in gloomy thoughts when it stopped before the door of the cottage. His sons and daughters, who had been very uneasy at his long absence, rushed to meet him, eager to know the result of his journey, which, seeing him mounted upon a splendid horse and wrapped in a rich mantle, they supposed to be favorable. He hid the truth from them at first, only saying sadly to Beauty as he gave her the rose, "Here is what you asked me to bring you. You little know what it has cost." But this excited their curiosity so greatly that presently he told them his adventures from beginning to end, and then they were all very unhappy. The girls lamented loudly over their lost hopes, and the sons declared that their father should not return to this terrible castle, and began to make plans for killing the beast, if it should come to fetch him. But he reminded them that he had promised to go back. Then the girls were very angry with Beauty and said it was all her fault, and that if she had asked for something sensible, this never would have happened, and complained bitterly that they should have to suffer for her folly. Poor Beauty, much distressed, said to them, "I have indeed caused this misfortune, but I assure you I did it innocently. Who could have guessed that to ask for a rose in the middle of summer would cause so much misery? But I did the mischief. It is only just that I should suffer for it. I will therefore go back with my father to keep his promise." At first nobody would hear of this arrangement, and her father and brothers, who loved her dearly, declared that nothing should make them let her go. But Beauty was firm. As the time drew near, she divided all her little possessions between her sisters and said goodbye to everything she loved. And when the fatal day came, she encouraged and cheered her father as they mounted together the horse, which had brought him back. It seemed to fly rather than gallop, but so smoothly that Beauty was not frightened. Indeed, she would have enjoyed the journey if she had not feared what might happen to her at the end of it. Her father still tried to persuade her to go back, but in vain. While they were talking, the night fell. And then, to their great surprise, wonderful colored lights began to shine in all directions, and splendid fireworks blazed out before them. All the forest was illuminated by them, and even felt pleasantly warm, though it had been bitterly cold before. This lasted until they reached the avenue of orange trees, where were statues holding flaming torches. And when they got nearer to the palace, they saw that it was illuminated from the roof to the ground, and music sounded softly from the courtyard. "The beast must be very hungry," said Beauty, trying to laugh, "if he makes all this rejoicing on the arrival of his prey." But in spite of her anxiety, she could not help admiring all the wonderful things she saw. The horse stopped at the foot of the flight of steps leading to the terrace, and when they had dismounted, her father led her to the little room he had been in before, where they found a splendid fire burning, and the table daintily spread with a delicious supper. The merchant knew that this was meant for them, and Beauty, who was rather less frightened now that she had passed through so many rooms and seen nothing of the beast, was quite willing to begin. For her long ride had made her very hungry, but they had hardly finished their meal when the noise of the beast's footsteps was heard approaching, and Beauty clung to her father in terror, which became all the greater when she saw how frightened he was. But when the beast really appeared, though she trembled at the sight of him, she made a great effort to hide her terror and saluted him respectfully. This evidently pleased the beast. After looking at her, he said, in a tone that might have struck terror into the boldest heart, though he did not seem to be angry, "Good evening, old man. Good evening, Beauty." The merchant was too terrified to reply, but Beauty answered sweetly, "Good evening, beast." "Have you come willingly?" asked the beast. "Will you be content to stay here when your father goes away?" Beauty answered bravely that she was quite prepared to stay. "I'm pleased with you," said the beast. "As you've come of your own accord, you may stay. As for you, old man," he added, turning to the merchant, "at sunrise tomorrow you will take your departure. When the bell rings, get up quickly and eat your breakfast, and you will find the same horse waiting to take you home. But remember that you must never expect to see my palace again." Then turning to Beauty, he said, "Take your father into the next room and help him to choose everything you think your brothers and sisters would like to have. You will find 2 traveling trunks there. Fill them as full as you can. It is only just that you should send them something very precious as a remembrance of yourself." And he went away after saying, "Goodbye, Beauty. Goodbye, old man." And though Beauty was beginning to think with great dismay of her father's departure, she was afraid to disobey the beast's orders, and they went into the next room, which had shelves and cupboards all round it. They were greatly surprised at the riches it contained. There were splendid dresses fit for a queen, with all the ornaments that were to be worn with them. And when Beauty opened the cupboards, she was quite dazzled by the gorgeous jewels that lay in heaps upon every shelf. After choosing a vast quantity, which she divided between her sisters, for she had made a heap of the wonderful dresses for each of them, she opened the last chest, which was full of gold. "I think, father," she said, "that as the gold will be more useful to you, we'd better take out the other things again and fill the trunks with it." So they did this. But the more they put in, the more room there seemed to be, and at last they put back all the jewels and dresses they had taken out, and Beauty even added as many more of the jewels as she could carry at once. And then the trunks were not too full, but they were so heavy that an elephant could not have carried them. "The beast was mocking us," cried the merchant. "He must have pretended to give us all these things, knowing that I could not carry them away." "Let us wait and see," answered Beauty. "I cannot believe that he meant to deceive us. All we can do is fasten them up and leave them ready." So they did this and returned to the little room, where, to their astonishment, they found breakfast ready. The merchant ate his with a good appetite, as the beast's generosity made him believe that he might perhaps venture to come back soon and see Beauty. But she felt sure that her father was leaving her forever, so she was very sad when the bell rang sharply for the second time, and warned them that the time had come for them to part. They went down into the courtyard, where 2 horses were waiting, one loaded with the 2 trunks, the other for him to ride. They were pawing the ground in their impatience to start, and the merchant was forced to bid Beauty a hasty farewell, and as soon as he was mounted, he went off at such a pace that she lost sight of him in an instant. Then Beauty began to cry and wandered sadly back to her own room. But she soon found that she was very sleepy, and as she had nothing better to do, she laid down and instantly fell asleep. And then she dreamed that she was walking by a brook bordered with trees and lamenting her sad fate, when a young prince, handsomer than anyone she had ever seen, and with a voice that went straight to her heart, came and said to her, "Ah, Beauty, you are not so unfortunate as you suppose. Here you will be rewarded for all you have suffered elsewhere. Your every wish shall be gratified. Only try to find me out, no matter how I may be disguised, as I love you dearly, and in making me happy you will find your own happiness. Be as true-hearted as you are beautiful, and we shall have nothing left to wish for." "What can I do, Prince, to make you happy?" said Beauty. "Only be grateful," he answered, "and do not trust too much to your eyes. And above all, do not desert me until you have saved me from my cruel misery." After this, she thought she found herself in a room with a stately and beautiful lady who said to her, "Dear Beauty, try not to regret all you have left behind you, for you are destined to a better fate. Only do not let yourself be deceived by appearances." Beauty found her dream so interesting that she was in no hurry to awake. But presently the clock roused her by calling her name softly 12 times. And then she got up and found her dressing table set out with everything she could possibly want. And when her toilet was finished, she found dinner was waiting in the room next to hers. But dinner does not take very long when you're all by yourself, and very soon she sat down cozily in the corner of a sofa and began to think about the charming prince she had seen in her dream. "He said I could make him happy," said Beauty to herself. "It seems then that this horrible beast keeps him a prisoner. How can I set him free? I wonder why they both told me not to trust appearances. I don't understand it, but after all, it was only a dream. So why should I trouble myself about it? I better go and find something to do to amuse myself." So she got up and began to explore some of the many rooms of the palace. The first she entered was lined with mirrors, and Beauty saw herself reflected on every side, and thought she had never seen such a charming room. Then a bracelet which was hanging from a chandelier caught her eye, and on taking it down, she was greatly surprised to find that it held a portrait of her unknown admirer, just as she had seen him in her dream. With great delight, she slipped the bracelet on her arm and went on into a gallery of pictures, where she soon found a portrait of the same handsome prince, as large as life, and so well painted that as she studied it, he seemed to smile kindly at her. Tearing herself away from the portrait at last, she passed through into a room which contained every musical instrument under the sun. And here she amused herself for a long while in trying some of them, and singing until she was tired. The next room was a library, and she saw everything she had ever wanted to read, as well as everything she had read, and it seemed to her that a whole lifetime would not be enough to even read the names of the books. There were so many. By this time it was growing dusk, and wax candles and diamond and ruby candlesticks were beginning to light themselves in every room. Beauty found her supper served just at the time she preferred to have it, but she did not see anyone or hear a sound. And though her father had warned her that she would be alone, she began to find it rather dull. But presently she heard the beast coming, and wondered tremblingly if he meant to eat her up now. However, as he did not seem at all ferocious, and only said gruffly, "Good evening, Beauty," she answered cheerfully, and managed to conceal her terror. Then the beast asked her how she had been amusing herself, and she told him all the rooms she had seen. Then he asked if she thought she could be happy in his palace, and Beauty answered that everything was so beautiful that she would be very hard to please if she could not be happy. And after about an hour's talk, Beauty began to think that the beast was not nearly so terrible as she had supposed at first. Then he got up to leave her, and said in his gruff voice, "Do you love me, Beauty? Will you marry me?" "Oh, what shall I say?" cried Beauty, for she was afraid to make the beast angry by refusing. Say yes or no without fear, he replied. Oh, no, Beast, said Beauty hastily. Since you will not, good night, Beauty, he said. And she answered, Good night, Beast, very glad to find that her refusal had not provoked him. And after he was gone, she was very soon in bed and asleep, and dreaming of her unknown prince. She thought he came and said to her, Ah, Beauty, why are you so unkind to me? I fear I am fated to be unhappy for many a long day still. And then her dreams changed, but the charming prince figured in them all. And when morning came, her first thought was to look at the portrait and see if it was really like him. And she found that it certainly was. This morning she decided to amuse herself in the garden, for the sun shone and all the fountains were playing. But she was astonished to find that every place was familiar to her. And presently she came to the brook where the myrtle trees were growing where she had first met the prince in her dream. And that made her think more than ever that he must be kept a prisoner by the beast. When she was tired, she went back to the palace and found a new room full of materials for every kind of work. Ribbons to make into bows, and silks to work into flowers. Then there was an aviary full of rare birds, which were so tame that they flew to Beauty as soon as they saw her, and perched upon her shoulders and her head. Pretty little creatures, she said. How I wish that your cage was nearer to my room, that I might often hear you sing. So saying, she opened a door and found to her delight that it led into her own room, though she had thought it was quite the other side of the palace. There were more birds in a room further on, parrots and cockatoos that could talk, and they greeted Beauty by name. Indeed, she found them so entertaining that she took one or two back to her room, and they talked to her while she was at supper, after which the beast paid her his usual visit and asked her the same questions as before, and then with a gruff good night he took his departure, and Beauty went to bed to dream of her mysterious prince. The days passed swiftly in different amusements, and after a while Beauty found out another strange thing in the palace, which often pleased her when she was tired of being alone. There was one room which she had not noticed particularly. It was empty, except that under each of the windows stood a very comfortable chair, and the first time she had looked out of the window it had seemed to her that a black curtain prevented her from seeing anything outside. But the second time she went into the room, happening to be tired, she sat down in one of the chairs when instantly the curtain was rolled aside, and a most amusing pantomime was acted before her. There were dances and colored lights and music and pretty dresses, and it was all so gay that Beauty was in ecstasies. After that she tried the other 7 windows in turn, and there was some new and surprising entertainment to be seen from each of them, so that Beauty could never feel lonely anymore. Every evening after supper the beast came to see her, and always before saying good night asked her in his terrible voice, "Beauty, will you marry me?" And it seemed to Beauty, now she understood him better, that when she said, "No, beast," he went away quite sad. But her happy dreams of the handsome young prince soon made her forget the poor beast, and the only thing that at all disturbed her was to be constantly told to distrust appearances, and to let her heart guide her, and not her eyes, and many other equally perplexing things, which, consider as she would, she could not understand. So everything went on for a long time, until at last, happy as she was, Beauty began to long for the sight of her father and her brothers and sisters. And one night, seeing her look very sad, the beast asked her what was the matter. Beauty had quite ceased to be afraid of him. Now she knew that he was really gentle in spite of his ferocious looks and his dreadful voice. So she answered that she was longing to see her home once more. Upon hearing this, the beast seemed sadly distressed and cried miserably, "Ah, Beauty, have you the heart to desert an unhappy beast like this? What more do you want to make you happy? Is it because you hate me that you want to escape?" "No, dear beast," answered Beauty softly. "I do not hate you, and I should be very sorry never to see you any more. But I long to see my father again, Only let me go for 2 months, and I promise to come back to you and stay for the rest of my life." The beast, who had been sighing dolefully while she spoke, now replied, "I cannot refuse you anything you ask, even though it should cost me my life. Take the 4 boxes you will find in the room next to your own and fill them with everything you wish to take with you. But remember your promise and come back when the 2 months are over, or you may have cause to repent it, for if you do not come in good time, you will find your faithful beast dead. You will not need any chariot to bring you back, only say goodbye to all your brothers and sisters the night before you come away. And when you've gone to bed, turn this ring round upon your finger and say firmly, 'I wish to go back to my palace and see my beast again. Good night, beauty. Fear nothing. Sleep peacefully, and before long you shall see your father once more.'" As soon as Beauty was alone, she hastened to fill the boxes with all the rare and precious things she saw about her, and only when she was tired of heaping things into them did they seem to be full. Then she went to bed, but could hardly sleep for joy, and when at last she did begin to dream of her beloved prince, she was grieved to see him stretched upon a grassy bank, sad and weary, and hardly like himself. "What is the matter?" she cried. He looked at her reproachfully and said, "How can you ask me, cruel one? Are you not leaving me to my death, perhaps?" "Oh, don't be so sorrowful," cried Beauty. "I'm only going to assure my father that I am safe and happy. I've promised the beast faithfully that I will come back, and he would die of grief if I did not keep my word." "What would that matter to you?" said the prince. "Surely you would not care." "Indeed, I should be ungrateful if I did not care for such a kind beast," cried Beauty indignantly. "I would die to save him from pain. I assure you it is not his fault that he is so ugly." Just then a strange sound woke her. Someone was speaking not very far away, and opening her eyes, she found herself in a room she had never seen before, which was certainly not nearly so splendid as those she was used to in the beast's palace. Where could she be? She got up and dressed hastily, and then saw the boxes she had packed the night before were all in the room. While she was wondering by what magic the beast had transported them and herself to this strange place, she suddenly heard her father's voice and rushed out and greeted him joyfully. Her brothers and sisters were all astonished at her appearance, as they had never expected to see her again, and there was no end to the questions they asked her. She had also much to hear about what had happened to them while she was away, and of her father's journey home. But when they heard that she had only come to be with them for a short time, and then must go back to the beast's palace forever, they lamented loudly. Then Beauty asked her father what he thought could be the meaning of her strange dreams, and why the prince constantly begged her not to trust appearances. After much consideration, he answered, "You tell me yourself that the beast, frightful as he is, loves you dearly, and deserves your love and gratitude for his gentleness and kindness. I think the prince must mean you to understand that you ought to reward him by doing as he wishes you to, in spite of his ugliness." Beauty could not help seeing that this seemed very probable. Still, when she thought of her dear prince, who was so handsome, she did not feel at all inclined to marry the beast. At any rate, for 2 months she need not decide, but could enjoy herself with her sisters. But though they were rich now and lived in town again, and had plenty of acquaintances, Beauty found that nothing amused her very much, and she often thought of the palace where she was so happy, especially as at home she never once dreamed of her dear prince, and she felt quite sad without him. Then her sister seemed to have got quite used to being without her, and even found her rather in the way, so she would not have been sorry when the 2 months were over. But for her father and brothers, who begged her to stay and seemed so grieved at the thought of her departure that she had not the courage to say goodbye to them. Every day when she got up, she meant to say it at night, and when night came, she put it off again, until at last she had a dismal dream which helped her to make up her mind. She thought she was wandering in a lonely path in the palace gardens, when she heard groans which seemed to come from some bushes hiding the entrance of a cave, and running quickly to see what could be the matter, she found the beast stretched out upon his side, apparently dying. He reproached her faintly with being the cause of his distress. And at the same moment, a stately lady appeared and said very gravely, "Ah, Beauty, you are only just in time to save his life. See what happens when people do not keep their promises. If you had delayed one day more, you would have found him dead." Beauty was so terrified by this dream that the next morning she announced her intention of going back at once. And that very night she said goodbye to her father and all her brothers and sisters. And as soon as she was in bed, she turned her ring round upon her finger and said firmly, "I wish to go back to my palace and see my beast again," as she had been told to do. And she fell asleep instantly, and only woke up to hear the clock saying, "Beauty, Beauty," 12 times in its musical voice, which told her at once that she was really in the palace once more. Everything was just as before, and her birds were so glad to see her, but Beauty thought she had never known such a long day, for she was so anxious to see the beast again that she felt as if supper time would never come. But when it did come, and no beast appeared, she was really frightened. So after listening and waiting for a long time, she ran down into the garden to search for him. Up and down the paths and avenues ran poor Beauty, calling him in vain, for no one answered and not a trace of him could she find. Until at last, quite tired, she stopped for a minute's rest and saw that she was standing opposite the shady path she had seen in her dream. She rushed down it, and sure enough, there was the cave, and in it lay the beast asleep as Beauty thought. Quite glad to have found him, she ran up and stroked his head. But to her horror, he did not move or open his eyes. "Oh, he is dead, and it is all my fault," said Beauty, crying bitterly. But then looking at him again, she fancied he still breathed, and hastily fetching some water from the nearest fountain, she sprinkled it over his face. And to her great delight, he began to revive. "Oh, beast, how you frightened me," she cried. "I never knew how much I loved you until just now, when I feared I was too late to save your life." "Can you really love such an ugly creature as I am?" said the beast faintly. "Oh, Beauty, you only came just in time. I was dying because I thought you had forgotten your promise. But go back now and rest. I shall see you again by and by." Beauty, who had half expected that he would be angry with her, was reassured by his gentle voice, and went back to the palace, where supper was awaiting her. And afterward the beast came in as usual and talked about the time she had spent with her father, asking if she had enjoyed herself and if they had all been very glad to see her. Beauty answered politely, and quite enjoyed telling him all that had happened to her. And when at last the time came for him to go, and he asked, as he had so often asked before, "Beauty, will you marry me?" she answered softly, "Yes, dear beast." As she spoke, a blaze of light sprang up before the windows of the palace. Fireworks crackled and guns banged, and across the avenue of orange trees, in letters all made of fireflies, was written, "Long live the prince and his bride." Turning to ask the beast what it could all mean, Beauty found that he had disappeared, and in his place stood her long-loved prince. At the same moment, the wheels of a chariot were heard upon the terrace, and 2 ladies entered the room. One of them Beauty recognized as the stately lady she had seen in her dreams. The other was also so grand and queenly that Beauty hardly knew which to greet first. But the one she already knew said to her companion, "Well, Queen, this is Beauty, who has had the courage to rescue your son from the terrible enchantment. They love one another, and only your consent to their marriage is wanting to make them perfectly happy." "I consent with all my heart," cried the Queen. "How can I ever thank you enough, charming girl, for having restored my dear son to his natural form?" And then she tenderly embraced Beauty and the prince, who had meanwhile been greeting the fairy and receiving her congratulations. "Now," said the fairy to Beauty, "I suppose you would like me to send for all your brothers and sisters to dance at your wedding." And so she did. And the marriage was celebrated the very next day with the utmost splendor, and Beauty and the prince lived happily ever after. Thank you for joining Freya's Fairy Tales. Be sure to come back next week for Zachary's journey to holding his own fairy tale in his hands, and to hear one of his favorite fairy tales.